Salut et bienvenue à Devoir, Vouloir et Pouvoir. Really wonderful verbs that are going to teach us a lot about being able to communicate because we're going to allow this wonderful nuance. And we call these modal verbs because they express certain modes of expression like must, shall, will, should, could, can, could, might, may, maybe, kind of thing. So devoir means to have to or to must. Vouloir is to want to, and pouvoir is to be able to or can. Let's take a look, though, when we're talking about conjugation, what we're really looking for at the first step of conjugation is recognizing patterns. So we're going to take a step back and look at the things that we already recognize. So conjugation patterns that we are familiar with so far are probably être, aller, avoir, and faire. Je suis, tu es, il est, nous sommes, vous êtes et sont. J'ai, tu as, il a, on, nous avons, vous avez, il est, elle, on, right? Je vais, tu vas, on va, nous allons, vous allez, ils vont. Je fais, tu fais, il fait, nous faisons, vous faites, ils font. And ER verbs are even easier than all of those combined. We just take off that ER and we add E, ES, E, ONS, OZ, ONT. And let's take a look at these. I know we've been looking at this type of conjugation chart, but I'm wondering if maybe side by side we'll be able to see some of those similarities a little bit more clearly and differences a little more clearly. So let's put être, avoir, aller, faire, and ER verbs here. And then take a look at those similarities. So notice je means I, and look at all of these verbs that have I in them, the conjugations. Je suis, j'ai, je vais, je fais, will all have an I, and the ER verb will have an E. The to form, notice all these S's. OS here for the ER verb. This is a wonderful pattern that we're going to keep seeing over and over again. Il ou elle ou on, he, she, or one, est, a, va, fait, and just an E. Now this T ending you're going to see because there are some verbs that I like to call SST verbs where T is just a common ending that we'll see. Nous sommes, we see this ONS, 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 very common. So if you just memorize the one that doesn't have ONS, you'll be pretty good. OZ, easiest one here, right? Most of your VU forms are going to have EZ, except for very few that have ES. And it's good to memorize those because there's very few. It will not take much memory. And then ENT is a common day ending. ONT is for irregular verbs, but ENT for the ER verbs. Okay, so now let's take a look at the conjugations of these modal verbs. We have vouloir, pouvoir, and devoir. Notice we still see the EZ and the ONS. C'est bien facile. And so we're taking this root of voul, pouve, dev, to have devons, devez, pouvons, pouvez, voulons, et voulez. So outside of that boot, these are pretty easy to conjugate. The problem is inside the boot. They get a little complicated. You see we have this E, with X's and T's. So there's one positive here. We can see a pattern between the vouloir, pouvoir being very similar where they're just putting EU inside the boot. And then for devoir, they're using OI inside the boot as the root. But with SST versus XXT. So let's recall that. And pronunciation. Je veux, tu veux, il veut, ils veulent. Notice, we need that sound of the L to notice the difference in sound here. Je peux, tu peux, il peut, ils peuvent. Je dois, tu dois, il doit, ils doivent. And devoir, it may not be similar to these two, but later on we're going to learn verbs like voir, to see, and boire, to drink. And you can see there's a very good similarity here with the OIS in bois, boivent, and voit, voit. So that'll be helpful later on if you keep your eye open for those patterns. So we have these wonderful verbs. They're conjugated like this. So conjugation is tricky, but not as terrible. But let's talk about some similarities that we have between these verbs and the other verbs that we've already used, like aime and adorer, because they can both have two verbs, like j'aime manger. Uses two verbs, I like to eat, and we're going to see that it's very similar in constructing a sentence with those two verbs, and it's also very similar with the way we use negation. So we can say j'aime manger le pain. So I like to eat bread, or je n'aime pas manger les escargots. I do not like to eat snails. Well, similarly, I can replace the M with veux, je mange le pain. I like to eat bread, je veux manger le pain. I want to eat the bread. And so I can replace this M with veux and follow the same pattern of je ne veux pas manger les escargots. I don't want to eat the snails. So they follow the same rule of two verbs in a row. The first one's conjugated and the second one is not. The conjugated verb is going to be wrapped around with negation if we want to make it negative. So notice I can do the same thing with peut. Je peux manger le pain. Je ne peux pas manger les escargots. So I can eat the bread, I can't eat the escargot. Similarly with dois, je dois manger le pain, I have to eat the bread. Je ne dois pas manger les escargots, I do not have to eat the snails. So again, the difference is here though. A lot of times when we say aime, we can say j'aime le basketball, which makes sense. I like basketball. I don't have to use a second verb. Well, a lot of times with verbs of modality, you will need a second verb. Now, vouloir, you don't always, because you can use a vouloir and an infinitive to want to do something. But you can also say, you know, I want something. So it can take a noun. However, pouvoir, you can't be able to and then a thing. You have to be able to do something. So pouvoir is going to need an infinitive, whereas vouloir will not need an infinitive. Similarly with devoir, it's going to need an infinitive. And if you don't, if you put a noun in there, that sounds like you owe somebody. So you can technically use devoir with a noun, but normally you will only use it with money, and then it changes meaning. It means I owe you some money. So that's very interesting. So let's take a look at these examples. Je veux du gâteau. I want some cake. Makes sense. Je voudrais du gâteau. I would like some cake. So again, I can use those with a noun. Voudrais is a polite form. It's the conditional form of the verb vouloir. And although we haven't learned it yet, it's very handy to use. If you're going to a restaurant anywhere in France, don't say je veux, say je voudrais for politesse, to be polite. And then you're more likely to get what you want. Je peux manger du gâteau. I am able to eat cake. Notice I need that verb and an infinitive here. Je ne dois pas manger du gâteau. I mustn't eat some cake. Je dois 5 euros à Bob. I owe 5 euros to Bob. So again, similarities are they will take a second verb. The second verb's not conjugated. And the difference is that some of them can't take a noun afterwards, other than vouloir. Common errors that I see with these. I'll have a student try to say, I have to do my homework, but instead of saying like I must do my homework, they're using the verb avoir, which means to physically have, like you have it in your hands. And that doesn't really work very well because that's what it means to physically have in your hands. So if I say, j'ai fait mes devoirs, it means, je faire mes devoirs. J'ai faire mes devoirs. Wow, it's so hard to say because it's so incorrect. It means I have in my hand to do my homework. So I'm holding in my hands this to do my homework thing. And that doesn't really make very sense. And the funny thing is you'll see later on that the verb avoir is used to talk about the past tense. So if I say j'ai and then another verb, sometimes the listener's going to hear, oh, I had done my homework instead of I have to do my homework. So you got to be careful with that. So you want to use for have to must, always think of devoir instead of avoir, because avoir doesn't mean to have to. That would be devoir, to have to. So je dois faire mes devoirs. I love these verbs because then you wind up being able to say things like Je veux manger beaucoup de biscuits de chocolat, which of course, if you know me, j'adore manger les biscuits de chocolat. And here we have Il y a quelques biscuits dans le placard. Look at these lovely cookies. Je peux manger les biscuits. I can eat them because look, they're there. I want to eat a lot of them. There are some there. I could eat them. Mais je ne dois pas manger les biscuits. Parce que je suis assez poorly. But I cannot eat the cookies because I'm already rather chubby. Pants not fitting. That's an issue. Especially for somebody as cheap as me who doesn't want to buy new pants. Okay. I hope you enjoy these verbs as much as I do. And remember, devoir, to have to, pouvoir, to be able to, and vouloir, to want. And if you have questions, laisse-moi savoir.